I paid nearly $50,000 for a luxury trip to heal our family. But the night before we flew, a notification on my mother-in-law's iPad froze my blood. It read, "Project Real Mom. They planned to swap me out for his ex-wife the moment we checked in. They think I am just a naive wallet. They do not know I saw their group chat, and they certainly do not know I control the money. My name is Hannah Wexler. I am 35 years old, and I have spent the last decade trying to earn my place in a family that never truly wanted me. We live in Crestview Harbor, Connecticut, a town where old money whispers and new money shouts. But tonight, the only thing loud was the silence in my living room. I had just finished packing the final suitcase for a trip that cost me nearly $50,000. It was a stay at Seastone Palms in the Florida Keys. I paid for every flight, every suite, and every meal, believing that this money would finally buy me some respect from my husband's family. It was late, nearly midnight. I realized I had forgotten to confirm the eco-tour for the children. My phone was charging upstairs, so I reached for my mother-in-law's iPad, which sat on the coffee table. Loretta rarely locked it. I tapped the screen to wake it up. I was about to open the browser when a notification banner slid down from the top. It was a message from a group chat titled Project Real Mom. The air left my lungs. My finger hovered over the glass. I tapped the banner. The chat history opened, revealing a conversation that had been active for weeks. The participants were my husband, Evan Price, his mother, Loretta, his sister, Maris, and a contact saved simply as Kara, Evan's ex-wife. There was one more stranger in the mix, a user named P. Alden. I scrolled up, reading the messages with a kind of detached horror. Let Hannah think this is a reconciliation trip, Loretta had written 2 days ago. Once we get to the resort, we change the room allocation. We swap the roles. Kara will be the real mom in every frame we shoot. Make sure the kids are prepped. Maris added, they need to be standing next to Kara, not the wallet. I felt bile rise in my throat. They called me the wallet. But the next message froze me completely. It was from P. Alden. Do not let her know about the inheritance yet. We need to get her to sign the power of attorney before the 60-day confidentiality period expires. If she finds out she holds the voting rights, we are finished. My hand shook, but my mind suddenly went ice cold. They knew. They knew about Uncle Warren. And they were not just planning to humiliate me, they were planning to rob me. I did not take a screenshot. I knew how the Apple ecosystem worked, and a screenshot would sync instantly to Loretta's iPhone upstairs. Instead, I pulled my own phone from my pocket. I opened the camera and took photos of the screen, segment by segment. I captured the dates, the names, the specific instructions about the room swap and the power of attorney. I uploaded them directly to a secure, encrypted email server I had set up years ago for work. Once the upload was complete, I deleted the photos from my camera roll. I took the hem of my silk pajama top and polished the iPad screen, wiping away the smudges of my frantic scrolling. I set the device back on the table. I checked the angle. I nudged it 2 millimeters to the left so it aligned perfectly with the edge of the coffee table. Exactly as Loretta, a woman obsessed with appearances, would have left it. Hannah. I jumped, but only internally. I turned my head slowly. Evan was standing in the doorway. He looked soft in the dim light, wearing that concerned expression I used to think was love. "Hey," he said, walking over. "You still up? You look intense." I forced a smile. It felt like stretching rubber over a skull. "I'm just tired," I said, my voice steady. "The packing took longer than I thought. I want everything to be perfect for everyone." Evan placed a hand on my shoulder. His touch made my skin crawl. "You worry too much," he said. "It's going to be a great trip. Relax." "Okay. We appreciate everything you do." "I know." I lied. He kissed the top of my head and went upstairs. I sat there in the dark for another minute. I looked at the expensive luggage by the door. I looked at the iPad. If they needed me to be the audience for their little play, I would play along. But they did not realize one thing. I would be the one to turn on the stage lights. I used to tell myself I had won the lottery with Evan. He was the picture of a classic gentleman, the kind who opened car doors and knew exactly which wine to pair with sea bass. His family, the Prices, carried themselves with the effortless confidence of people who had never checked a bank balance in fear. Compared to them, I was just Hannah, the operations manager at Larkspur Governance Solutions. I was good at my job. I spent my days analyzing corporate risk and streamlining broken processes. I could spot an inefficiency in a supply chain from a mile away, but for 3 years, I had been blind to the inefficiency in my own marriage. To them, I was useful, but I was not vital. I was the person who organized the schedules and paid the bills, yet I remained a permanent visitor in their lives. I loved Evan's children, Leo and Sophie. They were 12 and 14, ages where kindness is often traded for coolness. But we had found a rhythm. I made their lunches, helped with algebra homework, and sat in the bleachers for every soccer game. There were no evil stepmother tropes in our house, only a lingering, polite distance. It was a distance carefully maintained by Evan and his mother, Loretta. Whenever we had a good moment, a shared laugh or a successful dinner, one of them would inevitably sigh and say something about how much Kara would have loved this. They constantly reminded the children that while I was present, Kara was the template. Real mums were born, not married into the role. The only person who had ever truly seen me was my Uncle Warren. Warren Wexler was a quiet man who built a shipping empire without ever making a headline. When he died of a sudden heart attack 2 months ago, my world went gray. I thought I had lost my only ally. Then came the meeting with his personal attorney, Nora Halden. I sat in Nora's office, surrounded by mahogany bookshelves, expecting perhaps a sentimental trinket or a small cash sum. Instead, Nora slid a thick binder across the desk. "Warren left you everything." "Hannah," Nora had said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You are now the majority shareholder of Wexler Maritime Services. He also left you a liquid trust fund. The total valuation sits at roughly $19.4 million. I had stopped breathing. $19.4 million. It was an amount of money that did not just buy things, it bought freedom. But there was a catch. There is a 60-day confidentiality clause, Nora warned me, tapping a specific paragraph in the will. If the existence of this inheritance is revealed to anyone before the probate period ends, the assets move into a litigation trust. You would lose your voting rights immediately. Warren knew the sharks in this town. He wanted to make sure you were ready before the water turned red. I had kept that secret locked in my chest. The only soul I trusted was Jules Carver. Jules ran a podcast exposing corporate fraud, so she knew how to keep her mouth shut and how to document everything legally. When I told her, she did not scream or cheer. She just gripped my hand. "Be careful," Jules had said, her eyes serious. "Money like that changes how people look at you. If Evan or his family smell blood, they will bite." I thought she was being paranoid until Loretta started asking questions. It began a week before the trip. Loretta would drop by, sipping tea, and casually ask about joint filing status or power of attorney forms. "It is just for tax optimization, sweetheart," Loretta had chirped, smiling over her porcelain cup. "Evan is looking into some investments, and we want to make sure you are protected." I had brushed it off then. I thought she was just being her usual intrusive self. But sitting in the dark living room, staring at the perfectly aligned iPad, the pieces clicked together with a sickening precision. Loretta's questions were not innocent. They were reconnaissance. This trip to the Florida Keys was not a vacation. It was not a family reunion. It was a carefully constructed stage. They intended to replace me with Kara in the eyes of the children and the public, establishing her as the matriarch. Simultaneously, they planned to maneuver me into signing away my rights before I even knew I had them. They wanted the money Uncle Warren left me, but they did not want me. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. I looked tired. I looked like the easy target they believed me to be. They think they are taking a wallet on vacation, I whispered to the empty room. They have no idea they just invited the auditor. The humidity of the Florida Keys usually felt like a warm embrace, but as we walked into the lobby of Seastone Palms, it felt like a suffocating blanket. The resort was magnificent, a sprawling palace of white marble and teak wood. I walked to the reception desk with my platinum credit card in hand, ready to check into the oceanfront grand suite I had booked 4 months ago. The receptionist typed for a moment, frowned, and then looked up at me with an expression of professional pity. "I am so sorry. Mrs. Price?" she said, her voice lowered. It appears there was a system update regarding the primary booking name. The suite has already been keyed to. A Ms. Kara Price. We have moved you to a standard garden view room down the hall. My blood ran cold. I turned to look at the group behind me. Kara was already there, standing next to Evan, looking effortlessly chic in a linen dress that probably cost more than my first car. Before I could speak, Loretta stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. Her skin was cool, but her smile was venomous. "Sweetheart, Kara understands the children better. You should rest, don't push yourself," Loretta said, her voice dripping with artificial honey. "The suite is quite large and chaotic with the kids. You need your quiet time." I looked at Evan, waiting for him to defend me. Waiting for him to say that I was his wife and I had paid for this trip. Instead, he stepped closer to me and hissed under his breath. "Hannah, please," he whispered, his eyes darting around the lobby. "Do not make a scene. The kids need stability right now." He turned his back on me immediately. I watched as he walked over to Kara for a welcome photo near the fountain. He placed his hand on the small of her back, a gesture so familiar and intimate that it felt like a physical slap. I stood there, holding the key card to a standard room, while the woman he used to love walked into the suite I had paid nearly $10,000 a night for. Dinner was worse. We sat at the resort's premier seafood restaurant. The manager, a man with a stiff tuxedo and a wide smile, approached our table with a complimentary bottle of champagne. "Welcome back to Seastone," he beamed, looking around at the table. "It is wonderful to see the Price family reunion in full swing." Loretta clapped her hands together. "Oh, yes," she declared, her voice carrying to the neighboring tables. "It is a blessing. This is Kara, their real mom." She gestured grandly to Kara, then flicked a dismissive hand toward me. "And this is Hannah, a friend of the family." The title hung in the air like a bad smell. Friend of the family, not wife, not stepmother, just a hanger-on. I saw Evan texting frantically under the table. When I shifted in my chair to look at him, he immediately flipped his phone face down on the tablecloth. It was a small movement, but it was sharp as a thorn. I looked at the children. Leo and Sophie looked miserable and confused, their eyes darting between Kara and me. I knew this was not their fault. I caught Sophie's eye and gave her a small, reassuring nod. "You guys just have fun," I told them, keeping my voice steady. "I am here if you need anything." I did not stay for dessert. I excused myself, claiming a headache, and retreated to my small room overlooking the parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. The screen illuminated the dark room. I navigated to the transaction history for the supplementary credit card I had given Evan years ago. It was meant for emergencies only. Seastone Palms, spa $600, private catamaran tour $1,200, boutique purchase $400. They were living like royalty on my credit line while treating me like the help. I closed the banking app and opened the secure email server. There was a new message from Jules. It read, "If they are playing the real mum game, there is usually paperwork coming. Do not sign anything." I walked to the balcony door and slid it open. From the floor above, from the balcony of the grand suite, I could hear the clinking of glasses and Loretta's shrill laughter. They were celebrating their victory. They thought they had won. Laugh while you can, I whispered to the humid night air. Tomorrow morning, the money will be silent. I set my alarm for 3 minutes past 6 in the morning. The sun had not yet risen over the Atlantic, and the room was bathed in a cold, gray light. I sat up, picked up my phone, and dialed the priority line for my bank. The operator answered on the second ring. I need to place an immediate freeze on the supplementary card ending in 4588. I said, my voice crisp and professional. I also want to suspend international transaction privileges on the main account until further notice. Certainly. Ms. Wexler, the freeze is active as of now. Next. I opened the resort's concierge app. I navigated to the itinerary section. There, glowing in cheerful blue font, were the bookings made yesterday. A private sunset yacht charter priced at $3,000. A chef's table private dinner for $5. A professional family photography package. I tapped on each one. They were still within the 24-hour cancellation window. I hit cancel booking on every single item. The app refreshed, wiping the schedule clean. I showered, dressed in a sharp, business-casual blazer, and went down to the lobby. The night shift manager was just swapping out with the day team. Good morning, I said, leaning against the marble counter. I want to transfer all incidentals and future charges for the prize party to a single folio standing in my name only. I want full oversight before anything is processed. Please confirm this arrangement via email immediately. The chaos started at breakfast. I was sipping black coffee in the lobby lounge when I heard Loretta's voice rising an octave. She was at the concierge desk, her face flushing a deep, ugly red. What do you mean, declined? She shrieked. Try it again. It is a platinum card, I watched over the rim of my cup. The concierge looked terrified. Loretta turned and saw me. She marched across the lobby, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. You, she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at my chest. You canceled the yacht. You froze the card. You are ruining the children's vacation. I set my cup down slowly. I am not ruining anything. Loretta, I said calmly, I am just correcting the invoices. I noticed some unauthorized spending on a card meant for emergencies. I assumed it was fraud, so I shut it down. Evan appeared from the elevators, looking disheveled. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into a quiet alcove near the restrooms. His grip was tight. Hannah, what the hell are you doing? He whispered, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. Is this revenge because they changed the room? You are being petty. I pulled my arm free and looked him dead in the eye. No, Evan, this is not revenge. This is me stopping you from using me as an ATM. If you want a yacht, use your own card. If you want a private dinner, pay for it. He opened his mouth, then closed it, looking suddenly small. Kara drifted over a moment later, holding her phone. Hannah, I do not want to cause any drama, she said, her voice soft and fake. We just want everyone to heal. I glanced at her screen. She had just posted an Instagram story. It was a photo of Evan and Loretta laughing, captioned Family Healing Trip. I was nowhere in the picture. Loretta was still screaming at the front desk manager, demanding to speak to a supervisor. Her purse was sitting open on a velvet armchair nearby. The iPad was sticking out. I need to use the restroom. I announced. I grabbed my bag and scooped up the iPad in one smooth motion as I walked past the chair. Nobody noticed. Inside the locked stall of the restroom, I opened the cover. My hands were steady. I went straight to the group chat. There was a new file attached. It was a PDF titled Limited Authorization and Travel Consent. I opened it. It was a legal document granting Evan full power of attorney over my assets for the duration of the trip, citing incapacitation or unavailability as trigger clauses. I switched to the chat log. P. Alden had written, Resorts are chaotic. It is easy to force a signature there. Just tell her it is an insurance waiver for the kids' tour activities. She won't read the fine print. I felt a cold chill ripple down my spine. This was not just about social exclusion. They were not just trying to replace me in the photos. They wanted to replace my identity. They wanted my signature to rob me blind. I took photos of every page, noting the timestamps. I carefully wiped the screen and walked out, placing the iPad back in Loretta's bag just as she returned, breathless from her tantrum. "We will sort this out," Loretta snapped, glaring at me. "But first, we need to sign the insurance forms for the kids' snorkeling trip." I looked at her, and then at the iPad. "Of course," I said. "I would love to see the paperwork." I walked to the far edge of the marina, where the noise of the resort faded into the sound of lapping water, and dialed Nora Halden. I read her the name I had seen in the group chat, P. Alden. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "Hannah, listen to me very carefully," Nora said, her voice sharp and devoid of its usual warmth. "They are not just trying to humiliate you. They are targeting the voting rights of Wexler Maritime Services." My stomach dropped. Nora explained that P. Alden was Preston Alden, a shark of a lawyer representing Harborcrest Equity. This private equity firm had been trying to buy my Uncle Warren's company for pennies on the dollar for years. Warren had always refused. Now, with Warren gone and the 60-day confidentiality period still active, they saw a window. "If they get power of attorney over you," Nora continued, "they can cast your vote by proxy. They can approve a sale of the company to Harborcrest before you even legally take the chair." A text from Jules came through a moment later, adding the final layer of dirt to the grave they were digging for me. Jules had dug into Kara's employment history. Kara was not just a bitter ex-wife. She was a senior crisis manager for a PR firm that frequently contracted with Harborcrest. Her presence here was not a coincidence. It was a deployment. Suddenly, Evan's behavior over the last 6 months made terrifying sense. He had been vague about debts, claiming he owed money to friends for bad investments. He had never shown me the paperwork. Those were not friends. They were loan sharks from Harborcrest, and they had put a leash around his neck. He was not just a bad husband, he was a compromised asset. I returned to my room and retrieved a small, voice-activated recorder I used for board meetings. I placed it behind a vase of lilies on the dresser. In the state of Florida, and under the specific circumstances of my residency, I was entitled to record conversations in my own private dwelling to which I was a party. I needed them on tape. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. It was Loretta, holding a clipboard, with Evan trailing behind her like a ghost. "Hannah, darling," Loretta said, pushing into the room without waiting for an invitation. "We are running late for the boat. I need you to sign this consent form for the children. It is just a liability waiver." She thrust the clipboard at me. It was the same document I had seen in the PDF, the one granting broad legal powers, disguised under a cover sheet about snorkeling safety. I pressed my fingers to my temples and sat down on the bed. "I have a terrible migraine." "Loretta," I said softly, "I cannot read anything right now. My vision is blurry. Leave it here. I will read it and sign it after I take a nap." Loretta stiffened. She looked at Evan. "We do not have time for naps." "Hannah," Loretta snapped, "just sign the bottom line." I looked at Evan. He was sweating. He wiped his palms on his shorts. "Hannah, please," Evan said, his voice cracking. It is just standard procedure. Why do you have to be so difficult? Just sign it so we can go." He did not look at me with love or even annoyance. He looked at me with desperation. He did not need a wife. He needed a rubber stamp to save his own skin. I said no. "Evan," I said, my voice hard, "I will read it later." They left in a huff, taking the clipboard with them. As soon as the door clicked shut, I went down to the manager's office. I asked for the activity log regarding my room change. Since I was the paying guest on the master folio, he had to comply. He printed out the audit trail. I scanned the lines until I found the modification entry. Request source front desk walk-in, authorized by Maris Price and Kara Price. Reason guest preference. I folded the paper and placed it in my purse. The picture was complete. Project Real Mom was just a coat of paint. Beneath the petty family drama and the cruel exclusion, there was a cold, hard heist in progress. They did not just want to steal my pride. They wanted to steal a $19 million legacy. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Evan. I kept my tone resigned, the digital equivalent of a white flag. I am tired of the fighting. I will sign the authorization, but I insist on doing it in front of a notary public. I want to make sure no one can claim I was coerced later. It protects both of us. The response was immediate. I could practically feel the vibration of Loretta's excitement through the floorboards. Within 20 minutes, Evan replied that a mobile notary had been booked for 5 in the afternoon in the resort's business center. They thought I had finally broken. They thought the pressure of the silent treatment and the public exclusion had crushed me. While they were celebrating, I called Nora. She drafted a document in record time. It was a limited special power of attorney. It was precise, restrictive, and lethal to their plans. It authorized Evan to make decisions regarding travel logistics and emergency medical care for the children for exactly 7 days. It explicitly excluded any authority over financial assets, real estate, business interests, or voting proxies. I walked into the business center at 5 o'clock sharp. The room was cold. Loretta sat at the head of the conference table, her back rigid. Evan was pacing. To my lack of surprise, a man in a beige linen suit was sitting in the corner, reviewing some papers. It was the man from the group chat profile picture. "P. Alden. Oh," I said, stopping in the doorway. I did not realize we had company. "Is this the notary?" "No," Loretta said quickly. "This is Mr. Alden. He is a friend. He just happened to be vacationing here and offered to witness the signing." Pure coincidence. "How lucky for us," I said dryly. "Well, I have a witness too." I placed my phone on the table and propped it up against a glass of water. Nora's face filled the screen via video call. She looked severe in her office blazer, the shelves of law books behind her acting as a fortress of authority. "Good afternoon," Nora said, her voice amplified and clear. "I am recording this session for legal verification. Please proceed." Alden shifted in his seat. The mobile notary, a polite woman named Sarah, looked between us, sensing the tension. Loretta slid the document they had prepared across the mahogany table. "Just sign here." "Hannah," Evan said, offering me a pen. "Let's get this over with." "Nora needs to hear the terms first." I said. I picked up their document, Clause 4, regarding management of all business interests and voting rights in the event of unavailability. I looked at P. Alden. He was suddenly very interested in his watch. "Why does a travel consent form for a snorkeling trip need to access my business interests?" I asked. "It is standard boilerplate language," Loretta snapped, her composure cracking. "Stop being paranoid. It just covers everything just in case something happens to you. It is too broad." Nora's voice cut through the room from the phone speaker. "My client will not sign that. Hannah, please present the alternative." I reached into my bag and pulled out the crisp, fresh document Nora had emailed me. I slid it toward the notary. "This is a limited authorization," I told the notary. "It grants my husband full permission to handle medical emergencies and travel logistics for the duration of this trip. It expires automatically in 1 week. It grants no financial powers." I looked at Evan. "You said you needed this for the kids and the tour. Right. This covers exactly that. Unless you needed something else." Evan looked at P. Alden. Alden gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. They were trapped. If they refused to accept this document, they would be admitting that the tour was a lie and they were after the money. "Fine," Evan said, his voice hollow. "Whatever." I signed my document. The notary stamped it with a heavy, satisfying thud. I handed the paper to Evan. "Here you go," I said. "You can manage the schedule now, but you cannot touch the bank." Loretta looked like she wanted to scream. Her eyes were wide and furious, burning holes into my face. Kara, who was standing near the window, turned away. I saw her hand trembling as she reached for a glass of water. She knew the script had just been rewritten. I picked up my phone and ended the call with Nora. I walked out of the business center, leaving them in the silence of their failure. That evening, as I sat on my balcony drinking a glass of wine paid for with my own secure card, I opened the encrypted email. The latest photos from the iPad sync had arrived. The group chat was exploding. Loretta. She played us. She knew exactly what she was doing. P. Alden. The limited authorization is useless to Harborcrest. We cannot use this to force the vote. We need a new plan. I took a sip of wine and smiled for the first time since we landed. The game had officially changed. They were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. The vibration of my phone against the glass table shattered the quiet afternoon. It was an email from the Human Resources Department at Larkspur Governance Solutions. The subject line was red and capitalized. Urgent anonymous complaint, possible policy breach. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands remained steady. I opened the message. It was a summons for an immediate emergency video conference. The allegations were severe. An anonymous source had claimed I was abusing my administrative privileges to harvest sensitive client data and transfer files to an external drive. I knew exactly what this was. If I was fired for cause, specifically for data theft, the morality clause in my Uncle Warren's trust would activate. I would be deemed unfit to serve on the board of Wexler Maritime Services. They were trying to kill my reputation to steal my inheritance. I accepted the call. The face of our head of HR appeared on my laptop screen, looking grave. Hannah. These logs are disturbing, she began. We have reports of mass data exportation from your credentials occurring at 3 this morning. I leaned into the camera, my voice calm and icy. That is impossible, I said. I was asleep. I want an immediate IT audit based on device ID and IP geolocation. You will find that the traffic did not originate from my encrypted laptop. If you fire me without this forensic verification, I will sue for wrongful termination and defamation before the ink is dry. The head of HR blinked. She had expected a panic attack, not a procedural counter-demand. We will run the trace, she stammered. We will reconvene in 24 hours. I closed the laptop. Evan was sitting on the sofa, pretending to read a magazine. He looked up, his eyes wide and fearful. Hannah, maybe you should just, apologize, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Don't fight them. Just admit to a mistake and ask for leniency. It will be easier. I looked at him. He did not ask if I did it. He asked me to confess. Why would I apologize for something I did not do? Evan, I asked. He looked away, unable to hold my gaze. He knew. He knew about the email before I did. That night, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. Do not drink anything Loretta hands you at the dinner tomorrow. They want you drunk in front of the crowd so they can film it. I stared at the screen. Kara. The real mum was breaking rank. I replied with a location. The espresso bar near the tennis courts. 10 minutes. No cameras there. I found Kara sitting in the darkest corner of the patio. She was wearing a hoodie pulled up over her hair, looking nothing like the glamorous matriarch she had been playing all week. Her hands were shaking around a paper cup. Why are you warning me? I asked, sliding into the chair opposite her. Because this is going too far, Kara whispered, her voice barely audible. I signed up for a PR gig. I thought we were just pushing you out of the family photos. I did not sign up for a felony. She reached into her bag and slid a manila envelope across the table. Read it, she said. I opened the envelope. Inside was a consulting contract between Kara and a company called Palm Cairn Holdings, LLC. The fee was $50,000. Palm Cairn is a shell company for the people trying to buy your uncle's business, Kara explained, her eyes darting around the patio. They paid me to come here, to trigger you, to make you look unstable. But yesterday Loretta gave me a USB drive. She paused, taking a ragged breath. She wanted me to slip it into your laptop bag, Kara stammered. It is loaded with Larkspur's proprietary data. If you had gone through airport security with that, or if the police raided your room, you would go to federal prison. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were not just trying to get me fired. They were trying to frame me for corporate espionage. They were willing to send me to jail to get the voting rights. I didn't do it, Kara said quickly. I still have the drive. I was too scared. I reached out and placed my hand on the envelope. You are going to give me that drive. Kara, I said firm. And you are going to testify. If you help me take them down, my lawyer will ensure you have immunity. If you run, you go down with them. Kara looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. She nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. I am in. I took the envelope and the drive. I finally had the bait to pull the entire sea monster to the surface. The Seastone Palms family legacy dinner was held in the Crystal Ballroom, a venue that smelled of expensive orchids and old money. I walked in wearing the white silk dress Loretta had insisted I wear. It was a size too big, chosen specifically to make me look frail and diminished next to Kara, who was resplendent in emerald green. I kept my head down, playing the role of the exhausted, unstable wife perfectly. Loretta beamed as she handed me a flute of champagne the moment I approached the table. Drink up, sweetheart, she said, her eyes glinting with malice. It will help you. Relax. I took the glass but did not drink. I waited until Loretta turned to greet a local senator. Then I slipped to the bar. The bartender, a young man named David whose heavy tips I had been signing for all week, looked at me. Swap this for sparkling apple cider, I whispered, sliding the glass across the marble. Same flute. Do not let them see. David nodded imperceptibly. He knew who was actually paying the bills for this entire circus. I returned to the table with a clear head, sipping my apple juice while Loretta watched me with predatory anticipation. She thought I was about to slur my words in front of 50 of the wealthiest people in Florida. The lights dimmed. Loretta walked onto the stage, taking the microphone with the confidence of a woman who believes she has already won. A slideshow began to play on the massive screen behind her, showing photos of Evan and the children. Good evening. Loretta purred into the mic. Tonight is about family. It is about resilience. My son, Evan, has been through so much, but he is finally healing, thanks to the return of the true heart of our family, the children's real mum, Kara. She gestured to Kara, who stood up and waved, feigning modesty. The room applauded politely. Loretta took a breath, preparing to deliver the final blow to my reputation. And we must thank Hannah. Loretta continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Even though she has been struggling with her health and stability lately, she is here tonight. We just want her to get the help she needs. That was the cue. I looked toward the back of the room. Jules had just stepped out from the shadows of the AV booth, accompanied by a man in a sharp gray suit, our media attorney. She gave me a thumbs up. Suddenly, the slideshow of the children smiling on the beach cut to black. The music stopped abruptly. A harsh, white light flooded the screen. It was not a photo. It was a projection of a group chat. The header read, Project Real Mom. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The font was massive. Every person at every table could read the messages clearly. Loretta, change the room to the small one. Make Hannah think it is a reconciliation. Then we swap. Kara will be the real mom in every frame. Evan, she is paying for everything. Do not let her know about the inheritance yet. We need the signature. P. Alden. Get her to sign the power of attorney. If she reads the fine print, we lose the company. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Loretta stood on stage, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, staring at her own words projected 10 feet high behind her. "What is this?" Someone whispered loudly near the front. Then the slide changed. It showed the consulting contract Jules had uploaded. Pay to the order of Kara Price. Amount $50,000. Purpose, PR, crisis management, and lifestyle staging. Evan shot out of his chair, his face the color of ash. He lunged toward the stage. "Turn it off!" he screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched panic. "Turn it off, please. It is a mistake." He looked at me. I remained seated, calmly sipping my cider. He ran to me, grabbing the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "Hannah, stop this," he begged, sweat pouring down his face. "You are destroying us." I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "No. Evan," I said. "You chose the role. Now we are just waiting for the audience to applaud." A heavy hand landed on Evan's shoulder. It was Mr. Sterling, one of the resort's biggest donors and a man who sat on 3 charity boards. He looked from the screen to Loretta, his expression disgusted. "Loretta!" "Mr. Sterling boomed, his voice carrying through the silent room. "Is that LLC paying for this dinner? Are you using a shell company to stage a family reunion?" Dozens of phones were already in the air. The flashbulbs started to pop, not for the happy family, but for the crime scene. Loretta dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening screech, signaling the end of the Price family reputation. The offer arrived in my inbox at 8 in the morning, while the resort was still buzzing with the rumors of the previous night's disaster. It was a formal letter of intent from Harbor Crest Equity to purchase my controlling stake in Wexler Maritime Services. The price was insulting. They offered 50 cents on the dollar, citing my public instability and need for immediate medical rest as the justification for the discount. I forwarded the email to Nora. She called me within 30 seconds. "They are desperate," Nora said, her voice crackling with intensity. "The 60-day confidentiality window is almost closed. They know that once the probate period ends, you take the chair and they lose their chance to buy the company cheap. They are betting that the embarrassment from last night has broken you. Let them bet." I said, "I am ready to fold. Nora. But on my terms." I typed a reply to the acquisition team. I wrote that I was overwhelmed by the recent events and willing to negotiate a quick exit. I suggested we meet immediately at a neutral location, a rented conference suite at Sunline Towers, a commercial building 20 minutes from the resort. I knew they would take the bait. They thought I was a wounded animal looking for a place to bleed out in peace. I arrived at Sunline Towers with Nora and Jules flanking me. We sat on one side of a long glass table. Opposite us sat P, Alden, and a man I recognized from business magazines as Miles Grayson, the lead shark for Harbor Crest. Miles looked at me with a mixture of pity and predatory hunger. "Hannah." "This is for the best," Miles said, sliding a thick contract across the glass. "We can take the burden of the company off your shoulders. You can focus on getting well." I looked at the contract. It was a total surrender of my rights. "I am concerned about my reputation," I said softly, keeping my eyes down. "The investigation at my workplace, the HR complaint about the data breach. If I sell, will that persist? I cannot have a criminal record." Miles smiled, a slick, practiced expression that did not reach his eyes. "We have significant influence with the board of Larkspur," Miles said smoothly. "If you sign the voting proxy to us today, effectively immediately, I think we can ensure that the anonymous complaint is withdrawn. It would be a misunderstanding, a clerical error." Nora leaned forward, her pen hovering over her legal pad. "Just to be clear for the minutes of this meeting," Nora said, her voice neutral. "You are stipulating that the cessation of the HR investigation into Ms. Wexler is conditional upon her signing over the voting rights of Wexler Maritime Services to Harbor Crest Equity P. Alden shifted in his chair. He looked like he wanted to interrupt, but Miles was too arrogant to stop. He thought he was closing a deal with a housewife. "We are saying that cooperation yields cooperation," Miles said, leaning back. "Loretta told us you would be difficult at first, but she promised you would eventually be soft. She said you always fold to keep the peace. So, let's keep the peace. Hannah." I stopped looking down. I sat up straight, my spine snapping into a posture of absolute command. I looked Miles directly in the eyes. "Thank you," I said, my voice clear and cold. I needed exactly that sentence. I reached for the stack of papers Miles had pushed toward me. I flipped them over, ignoring his confused expression. I pulled a different document from my own briefcase and placed it on the table. "I am signing something today, Miles, but it is not a sale." I uncapped my pen and signed the document with a flourish. I spun it around so they could read the header: "Notice to preserve evidence and intent to litigate." What is this?" Miles stammered, his smile vanishing. "That," I said, standing up, "is a formal notification that this meeting has been recorded in compliance with state law, as all parties were notified of the active minutes. You just admitted to extortion and conspiracy to obstruct a corporate investigation. You admitted that my mother-in-law, Loretta Price, acted as your agent to manipulate me." Jules placed a small recording device on the table. The red light was blinking steadily. "Loretta promised." The recording replayed Miles's voice, crystal clear. "P." Alden turned pale. He began stuffing papers into his briefcase, his hands shaking. "We are leaving," Alden hissed, grabbing Miles by the arm. "Go ahead," I said, watching them scramble. "But do not delete any emails. My forensic team has already preserved the server logs. If you destroy a single byte of data, I will add spoliation of evidence to the charges." Miles looked at me, and for the first time, he saw the CEO of Wexler Maritime Services, not the wife of Evan Price. "You set us up," he whispered. "You set yourselves up." I replied, "I just turned on the lights. I watched them flee the conference room." I turned to Nora. "Do we have enough?" I asked. Nora smiled, closing her notebook. "We have enough to bury them," she said. "Call the board meeting." The headquarters of Wexler Maritime Services in Port Hallowick was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the gray Atlantic. I stood at the head of the massive oak conference table, flanked by the entire board of directors. Security was tight, but I had left strict instructions to let them in. At 10 o'clock sharp, the double doors burst open. Loretta, Evan, Maris, and P. Alden marched in. They looked frantic. Loretta was already shouting before she crossed the threshold. "This meeting is invalid," Loretta shrieked, waving a hand at the board members. "My daughter-in-law is mentally incompetent. We have medical concerns regarding her stability. She is not fit to hold the chair." I did not flinch. I simply pointed to the row of empty chairs along the wall, far away from the voting table. "You are guests here," I said, my voice cutting through her noise like a blade. "Sit down or security will remove you." They hesitated, stunned by the cold authority in my voice, and took their seats. I nodded to Nora. Nora dimmed the lights and projected the timeline onto the main screen. It was a forensic dissection of their greed. First came the resort logs showing the unauthorized room changes. Then came the consulting contract between Palm Cairn Holdings and Kara. Then, the emails instructing Kara on how to stage the photos. Finally, Nora played the audio recording from the meeting at Sunline Towers. The room filled with the clear voice of Miles Grayson admitting that Loretta had promised I would be soft, and that they would make the HR investigation disappear if I surrendered the company. The board members turned to glare at the Price family. Loretta shrank into her chair. Evan looked at his shoes. "We have one final witness," I announced. The side door opened and Kara walked in. She refused to look at Evan. She stood at the podium and spoke clearly into the record. I was hired by a shell company representing Harborcrest to impersonate the mother of the children and destabilize Mrs. Wexler, Kara said, her voice shaking slightly. I was instructed to pressure her into signing a power of attorney. I am cooperating fully in exchange for immunity regarding the corporate espionage charges. I stood up. They used the vacation I paid for to erase my role in the family. I told the board. Then they tried to erase my signature. Then they tried to steal my voting rights. It was never about the children. It was a hostile takeover. The chairman of the board did not even need to discuss it. He called for a motion. All in favor of rejecting the acquisition offer from Harborcrest, filing immediate extortion charges, and initiating an independent audit. Every hand went up. I turned to Evan. He was pale, sweating in the air-conditioned room. Did you know I asked him? Did you know they were going to plant evidence on my laptop to get me fired? Hannah, Evan stammered, his eyes filling with tears. I needed the debt to go away. Please, I did not want you to go to jail. He did not say no. His silence was the confession. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a thick file. I slid it down the long table until it stopped right in front of him. Those are divorce papers, I said, and a civil restraining order preventing you or your mother from coming within 500 feet of me or my assets. But the kids, Evan whispered. We can work this out. You cannot just replace us. I looked him dead in the eye. I am not replacing you with a real dad. Evan, I said, you are being replaced by consequences. I pulled out one final sheet of paper. It was a directive to the bank. With a single, fluid motion, I signed the bottom line. That signature closes every joint account, cancels every supplementary card, and revokes every loan guarantee I ever signed for you. I said, as of this second, you are penniless. I walked out of the boardroom without looking back. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the HR department at Larkspur. The investigation had been dropped due to evidence of external tampering. I was clear. I walked out of the building and into the cold sea breeze of Port Hallowick. They wanted me to disappear from their family picture. I granted their wish. I disappeared from their wallets. And I disappeared from their lives. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from, as I would love to hear from you. Do not forget to subscribe to Victoria Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people.